What is up, everyone? Brandon Ferst, aka First Report, representing the First Off the Bench Podcast Network. Everyone comes off the bench. We are first. Welcome into another edition of the NFL Weekly here on the network. Break down everything the NFL has to offer. It's week 2 already. Kind of shows you how quick this season goes. When we get rolling, it is Thursday night. There will be a game tonight, Chiefs Chargers. We won't be covering that just because of our schedule, but we will get through 10 games. And of course, when I say we, I mean myself and my compatriots. We'll start with Coach Brandon Lupian. You can find Coach at Portland 76er on Twitter. How you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing well. I'm glad to finally be able to share the screen with you gents, and on to week 2. Looking forward to a better week on my end. Haven't heard how you guys did, but I know I think I just got the Minnesota game.
Yeah, I got the Pittsburgh game, but to be fair, I usually don't do any actual hardcore betting the first 2 or 3 weeks. I just would like to see the lay of the land before I become average. But with that being said, we have Raider Jim Martinez. You can find Mr. Martinez at Raider Jim 1090. How you doing tonight, sir?
Not doing too bad. Like I told you, I got the COVID booster last night, the new and improved one. And as the guy's putting the needle in my arm, I said, "What do you know about side effects?" He says, "I don't know. We just got it." He said, "So hardly anybody's had it." And Coach, you missed it. I told Brandon before he hit record, I feel like the Raiders starting left tackle right now.
Down and out.
Yeah.
Just beat.
So we're gonna
Aching all
officially
over.
the new COVID booster is officially the Khalil Mack.
That's it. Oh, there was
that's our slang for the new COVID booster. So go get your Khalil Mack as soon as possible. But yeah, it was that's a perfect segue, obviously, into the first thing we will talk about before we dive into the games. Just a little bit of a recap, what our thoughts were on week 1 of the NFL season. We'll start with you, Raider Jim. Obviously, we already kind of somewhat made reference to it. Rough weekend for the Raiders. What are your thoughts on that? And of course, everything else going on, anything that caught your eye?
Yeah, I mean, the two positives came out of the Raider game. Devontae Adams is a Raider.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also have, I have to refer here because my Nate Hobbs. Nate Hobbs is really coming into his own. And Nate Hobbs complimenting Jonathan Abrams in the defensive secondary is not too bad. However, got to get that linebacking core tuned up because they gave up too many passes all over the place. There wasn't enough pressure on the offensive side. Thank God we got rid of Alex Leatherwood. Didn't that improve things on the offensive line? Way to go, guys. That was an abysmal display by the left side of the offensive line, the right side of the offensive line. That has to be considered as a contributing variable to Carr's performance. And at the same time, Derek made some of those same mistakes he's always made the last few years. And I'm running out of gimmies. I'm running out of accepting, well, it was this or that, or gosh, it was my fault. But next time I'll do it better. Opening drive, they moved with authority. They couldn't get in from the, inside the red zone, real close inside the red zone. And then it was just kind of like they choked. And then when they got close within a touchdown or to get the 2-point conversion so they could tie with a field goal at the end, they couldn't convert there either. So if you don't have the mentality or the capability to put it away when it's close like that, you're just setting yourselves up for one more very long season for your team and for the Raider Nation. And around the rest of the league, what just a wacky week 1, perhaps one of the worst weeks as far as my predicting who's going to win, overs, unders, things like that. Hit a few good ones, but then at the same time, I think the one I was most pleased with is I did take the Bears out of the gate. And that ended up being a real entertaining game, I thought. The climate, the elements just really added to the game. And it was just fun to watch. Absolutely fun to watch. The Chiefs, I thought maybe they'd be slowing down. So either they aren't slowing down or Arizona's not as good as I thought they were going to be. It was a good, entertaining, educational week 1.
Yeah, definitely. And you're gonna hopefully get a taste of that. Whether or not Arizona is up to snuff or it was just the Chiefs, as the Raiders will take on the Cardinals here. We'll talk about that actually here to start things off. But Coach Lupian, your thoughts? Saints, my goodness. The one thing I did say last week is the Falcons, their quote unquote Super Bowl game. And I kind of said they might come out quickly, try and guess what they did, but death taxes and the Falcons gonna Falcon. It's the fourth quarter. They're up by multiple scores and they lose the game. It's almost stranger than fiction, but your thoughts on that and anything else going on around the league?
Yeah, 16-point deficit going into the fourth quarter. I was ready to turn it off, and I just kind of was waiting for something to start clicking. And finally, Jameis started getting some opportunities to hit targets and hit targets in stride and hit targets in pressure-filled, situations and get some scores and let some of the weapons run loose. And I think the underlying reality of that game, and probably for the majority of the games across the league, was how not prepared offensive lines were, how not prepared or in rhythm quarterbacks were, for the lack of work, for the quote unquote lack of one more preseason game and losing those reps out. And I think you saw it across the league. I mean, I know Jameis missed the first two preseason games. Well, that's 2 quarters. And then he gets a quarter and a half in the third preseason game. It kind of showed that first 3 quarters of a real game. And he finally got going in the fourth quarter. So I think that's the underlying truth for that first week. There's just a lot of teams unprepared in certain positions, like the O-line, like the reps for the quarterbacks, unless teams knew we're going with this such and such person from the go, get them more reps throughout the season. I mean, Jameis is coming off that ACL injury, so rehabbing all season long, limiting the reps in practice, limiting the reps in preseason, trying to grade a guy like Ian Book and give Andy Dalton some run to get him prepared for a backup role with the team. And then, my goodness, I hate to nitpick on my O-line, because our O-line has been one of the steadying forces throughout the league for the last number of years. But Raider Jim hit on it the week before on the podcast, not having a solidified left tackle. It really showed its grit, or it really showed it's the loss of it early on in that game. And James Hurst was in and out of preseason games and practices, nursing some injuries, and then Penning is out the entire year with turf toe. So it's going to be an interesting season moving forward. Raider Jim touched on it with his assessment of week 1. There's a lot of learning that happened week 1, and listening to Dennis Allen in the post-game interviews, and those in his team, listening to him. Guys, get ready for an ego check in film tomorrow, because we are going to learn from a lot of our mistakes, and no one could take it personal. And I think across the league, that's going to be the sentiment moving forward. But I'm glad we're 1-0. And anytime you get a win in the conference, it's a good win.
Yeah. I would say I agree with all of that. And there seemed to be just one kind of outlier in that, in terms of the offenses being ahead of the defenses. And that was in my game. The Eagles and Lions, both offenses look to be in midseason form. We talked about the offensive lines, and I expected the defensive line for the Eagles to figure out a way to get after Goff, and they did, but not to the abilities that I expected and the dominance. It was a 3-point game. I don't know if it was garbage time late. I'll be the first one to admit, I don't have the ticket this year. I don't have the $400, so I was watching through Red Zone, and Instead of showing what was going on in the Eagle game, we saw a lot of dings and donks off the kickers instead, but a 38-35 victory is at the end of the day what it is. The offense, AJ Brown has arrived. I brought it up last week, the number one wide receiver, first time since TO that I believe we've had that number one guy. And my goodness, did it show up. And I think as the season progresses, it's only going to get better. I was excited to see what the offense did. Now, defensively, there were a couple takeaways that you're going to feel good about. But at the end of the day, if you want to compete in this league and compete to go to the Super Bowl, you're going to have to be better against the Jared Goffs of the league and the Dan Campbell coach teams. At the end of the day, you can't give up 35 points to the Lions, even if you are in Detroit. Because at the end of you're gonna need to beat Rodgers and Brady, and if you're giving up 35 to Detroit, we might be looking at the 50s for those. And as much as I love our offense, I don't think 50s in our crystal ball against teams like that. So definitely some nitpicking that could be done, but at the end of the day, it's a road win. You're 1-0, just kind of like Coach talked about in the conference against a team that maybe people thought should have won by more, but this isn't the BCS. I say it all the time. We don't have to, no one's picking the top 12 teams out of, the Sporting News's AP poll. No, you just win your games and you get in and we go from there. So, and then across the league, it was crazy, wacky the whole morning. You just wondered if the Pittsburgh Cincinnati game was ever going to end. You wondered if Mike Tomlin was just going to hand a pink slip to kickers, or if anyway, they were just going to get, fired on the field. It was pretty crazy. And of course, the NFC or the AFC South. What more can you say? A division that doesn't win a single game, and you have two teams playing against each other. Insert your jokes there, but we will get looking ahead to week number 2 of the NFL season, the way we always do it, checking out our individual teams and divisions from a gambling point of view. And we're going to start in the desert in Vegas. And as two desert teams come together, the Arizona Cardinals head to Vegas to take on the Raiders. The Raiders 5-point favorites here at home. The over-under here is 51.5. There's only one of us who could start this one off. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Raiders 5-point favorites at home against the Cardinals.
I have at home with the way they played last week. I'm not seeing it. I will take Arizona +5, maybe even 5.5 on this one. And I would also go under 51.5. I'll go on the under on this one. I do think the Raiders get the victory, and that is primarily because I'll give them half a point because they're playing at home. They proved that they can strike offensively. But the real reason I'm going to give them the nod, Arizona's just beat up. Kyler Murray is, he's not going to have a good day out there, although the pressure, there was virtually no pressure from the Raider front or the edges. So we'll see. Hopefully they're making their adjustments now. But regardless, Kyler Murray just does not have a lot to work with right now. Rondell Moore has a hamstring injury, apparently is not going to play. Of course, DeAndre Hopkins is suspended. And their defense was just manhandled by Mahomes. But again, you look at that, you take that with a grain of salt. That was Patrick Mahomes and just doing whatever he wanted to do. And that's exactly what happened. So I do think the Raiders will prevail. Got to see better play out of the offensive line for sure, and have to see accuracy, a smart game from Derek Carr. If we didn't have Carlson, we wouldn't be in the games, which again goes back to the 2000s, early 2000s, when you had Sebastian Janikowski. If it wasn't for him, we'd have been out a lot of games. So there we have it.
Yeah, I like that. I like that breakdown. Going to be an interesting one. Coach, what are your thoughts? Raiders hosting the Cardinals, a battle of two teams needing to rebound from bad week ones.
So I don't know if it's more of a want the Raiders to cover the spread and want the Raiders and the Cardinals to go over that 51.5. But it's really hard to judge what Arizona really has in the tank. Not a fatigue factor, but you listen to Kingsbury afterwards, and he's taking shots at his quarterback. And then you recall what the quarterback and the team had drama all off season. I don't know what really or how to really invest my time because I don't know how much invested they have in each other. So I think that's where I want the Raiders to cover that 5. But with that kind of descent with Arizona, I'm not sure 51.5 is doable. Doable on one side, favorably for the Raiders since I want
Right.
them to get that 5, but just not sure what Arizona really has to offer for themselves. And then again, with guys out with suspensions and injuries, it's just not looking doable. And I thought to myself, wow, you really sound convincing some teams last week, and it just hit the fan. I'm trying to convince myself here. That's why I'm saying it's more of a want. I'm going to go with the under 51.5, but I think if the prognosticators and the Raiders think they should be in the run for this AFC West, which I think is a really tough conference to get through, then you got to play and your expectations have to be there to put up points and stop teams. I like the Raiders for that point, and that's my want them to cover the 5. So I like Raiders to cover the 5. I don't necessarily like either team to cover the over 51.5.
Yeah, I agree on the over-under. 2 teams that struggled to score last week, at least consistently. Obviously, the Raiders did what they need to, or 19 points isn't anything to sneeze at. But for me, it's interesting, and it's been a theory that's been out there. And there was somebody, I don't know who it was, somebody on Twitter, Kyler Murray and Call of Duty, and hang with me, please. Don't dismiss me, don't turn me off or anything like that. There are numbers out there, and you don't have to quote me. Every single number drops on what are called double XP weekends, which are essentially double jeopardy, or your opportunity to get twice as many points for playing this video game. And in his contract, at least originally when it was signed, there was talk about homework or needing to have time for film, things like that. Now, this weekend is what's called a beta weekend, which is probably even bigger than double XP weekend. Beta weekend is when you get a free preview of the new game that's coming out, I think, in a month or 6 weeks. They're in Vegas, and everyone says, oh, well, when he's on the road, they usually get there Friday. This isn't the 1990s where you got to bring 18 different cords with you to get it's real easy to, I don't know. I don't understand the spread. When it first came out, I know that the Cardinals struggled last week, but 5 points for the Raiders. But at the same time, I don't know. Everything just kind of adds up. I'm definitely taking the under here. Like I said, I probably won't actually dive in, but because of that, I just think you have to take the Raiders. I think they can go out. Their offense was more consistent, period. And I don't think the Chiefs defense is anything to write home about either. The Charger defense is probably better if we're really getting down to brass tacks. And they were at home, although at the same time, the Raiders were at home, if you really want to break that down, without being actually at home. So it's just interesting. Keep your eye on that. Once again, the Kyler Murray and Call of Duty this weekend, a very big weekend for the Call of Duty players. Could be something to keep an eye on there. Another struggle for Kyler Murray, and we might see some people grab his gamer tag and see if they can do some investigating. But
I think with that, I think we're all well aware pro athletes and their affinity for video games and video games like Call of Duty. I mean, as a Padre fan and as a San Diego local, we know the struggles of a Will Myers and him streaming and knowing I'm gonna be on this game. But I mean, also speaking of a local fan, like Taylor Fritz was at Wimbledon pre-COVID, and he's going into a 5th set and it gets suspended because of darkness. And I know this for a fact because his dad's talking about it, or was talking about it at the time. This kid was up till 3 a.m. playing some video game. I forgot the name of it. My son used to play. I used to make sure he didn't as much, but they're playing it all night long, knowing he's got to be up at 8 a.m. to finish that 5th set. And he just got spanked because of being tired and just wanting to do that. So these guys, they're kids too, and they don't understand, hey, this is their profession and they got to take it one step higher than being a kid and playing video games. So, hey,
Amen.
Get it together, please.
Yes, definitely. Sticking in the AFC West, we get a matchup, two teams that definitely, obviously, Houston gave up a huge lead in their game, and Denver has, we got some questions for Denver's coaching staff, but Houston will head to the Mile High City. The Broncos are 9.5-point favorites here. The over-under is 45.5. It is the AFC West. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Broncos hosting the Texans.
I'm hoping what comes out of last week's game is the phrase gets put into play, lesson learned. The Colts giving up another 17 points, end up with a tie. I don't see it. And I think if they watch the films from the game the other night, you can see where Denver has some weaknesses or trouble executing. They were the only team, I believe, that was worse than the Raiders in the red zone week 1. They were in the red zone 4 times and they couldn't score a touchdown. And that's just frustrating. Whether I want a team to win or not win, it's just frustrating to see teams get that close and you can't execute, and I have that, it's Brandon, it's Coach, it's Jim. No way in hell we're ever going to be in the NFL. We were never going to do it. And you see these guys making the money they make. And one of the pregame things I saw going into week 1, 2 of the teams, one of the guys' big deal was he already had his post-game invitation to trade jerseys with somebody on the other team. So what motivates these guys, as Coach alluded to, playing video game, getting my autographed jersey afterwards. I don't know. So, but on the game itself, this game coming up, I think Houston's going to have a better chance than people might think. The matchup I'm looking at is the cornerback, Derek Stingley against Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. That could be good. If they can keep those guys in check, the wide receivers, then it's going to be a closer game than people think. I'll take Houston plus 10 on that one because I think they might lose by 7, they might lose by 9, but to take 10, I don't like that. And I do think, I hit the wrong button here, because the over-under as I see it is 45.5. Might drop it down a point and then take it at 44.5 and go over, because I can see it being 24-21.
Yeah, it was a really, really rough week for the was it Nate Hackett there in Denver. I don't know how. It was almost surreal. I was watching the game and I thought maybe the refs, they signaled for a timeout, but the clock just kept going, or you have 3 timeouts, 53 seconds to go. I understand the thought process of we don't want to give him a whole lot of time, but it's Geno Smith. I know he was having a good game, but we're not talking about Tom Brady. I'm not talking about Aaron Rodgers, not talking about Drew Brees. I mean, my goodness.
We're not even talking about Russell Wilson.
Yeah.
And he's on that team.
Yeah. Yes. And that's the crazy thing. I know Brandon McManus is a good kicker, and but at the same time, you're not in Denver. You're not getting that
elevation.
That thin air. It didn't make a whole lot of sense at the time. I still don't think it does. Russell Wilson, though, is the perfect quarterback for that to happen to, because you say whatever you want about Russell Wilson, that man, at the very least, publicly, is unflappable. He's always going to say the right thing. Let's just say if that happened to Aaron Rodgers, I don't think we would hear the hush from Rodgers the way we have from Russell Wilson. But Raider Jimmy brought up a great point, and it was Derek Stingley. I was very impressed with what I saw out of him last week. You go up against Matt Ryan, who, look, isn't the gunslinger, even what he used to be, but at the same time, He's very smart. He's very experienced. He knows how to beat young cornerbacks. Well, that didn't really happen. Now, once again, I didn't watch the whole game. I'm not breaking down film over here, but for the most part, one-on-ones, I saw Stingley on the better end more often than not. And that's really all you can ask for out of a cornerback, let alone a young cornerback. I agree. I think Houston's the play here. 9.5. I'll take 10. I'll take 10.5. In terms of the over-under, with these two offenses, I'll take the under until I kind of see something different. I will say Davis Mills, he's a pretty darn good quarterback he's smart. He's got, I feel like his neck is longer than Kyler Murray's whole body. But at the same time, he seems to be able to keep his team in it. And I think that's all Houston needs because they have enough talent on defense to make something happen. It'll be interesting to see going forward, but I do like the under here, but I definitely really like Houston 9.5, plus 9.5. Coach, what are your thoughts?
I think, last week Houston's proved to be able to score. Davis Mills going into his second full season after a solid, quiet, sneaky, sleepy rookie year. What was he, like a third, fourth, or fifth round pick? Yep. Nobody expected him to make the impact he did to start his NFL career with all the Deshaun Watson hoopla and noise going down in Houston. And this kid puts up solid first rookie year. We saw the maturity leading his team early on into last week's game against Indy. Who knows between the lines where it all fell apart for them last week, but I like how you both pointed out that, hey, these guys could play. They could score. 9.5 is a whole lot doable in favor for Houston. So I like that, and I'll stick with the Houston minus 9.5 anytime. I won't touch the under over. Just I'm not sure what to expect scoring wise from Denver. A lot of emotions went into the last week's game against Seattle. I'm going to attribute a lot of karma into some of the decision making and the inability of Russ to put up points. But, I think coaches take a lot of the loss and blame. Well, in that respect, Hackett deserves a lot of that loss for the lack of clock management and for the lack of just taking the sure points. Take your sure points. Know that you got a guy in Russ that, one, he's been in the situation. Two, he's in a field that he's comfortable playing in. And three, like, you have a pretty solid defense. Take the gosh darn points and put the pressure back on the other team or opposing team to come up with the goods. And I think Gino, you can't expect Gino to put up the goods all the time. But they made it easy for him, I think. And yeah. I expected more from Denver, but I really am a Davis Mills fan. And I didn't like him at Stanford when he's playing against San Diego State. Was rooting against him, but he's a smart, headsy kid. And I think last year he woke up a lot of those collective eyes around the league as far as him being like a QB1 moving forward in his career.
Definitely. He definitely turned some heads. A lot of people would say outside of Mac Jones may have been the second best quarterback rookie class last year with all that being said. So I will say just one thing, Seahawk fans, I understand your frustration with Russell Wilson and all that, but goodness gracious, booing a man who won you championships, took you to Super Bowls. Most of those people couldn't figure out where the stadium was in the city before Russell Wilson got there. But y'all have the gall to boo him. I've always said, if you want to know if they're a true Seattle Seahawk fan, ask them what position Sean Alexander played. If they can answer you that, they are a true Seahawk fan. If not, enjoy yourself, the 12th man, quote unquote.
Forget Sean Alexander. How about Louis Rawls?
Well, yeah. I mean, we gotta temper our expectations on some of those, because not everybody's scouring the depth chart every day. I figure someone who won an MVP 15 years ago,
Rawls,
you should know the name of. But
Rawls led the team in rushing a season. They
oh
they
yeah,
should know.
yeah. But
He was a fantasy sleeper for me that year. It's the only reason why I know his name.
there you go. Moving on into the NFC South.
Ooh.
Course, coach's domain, a big one for those Saints. Big showdown early on against for two teams that more than likely will be fighting out for the division. Tampa Bay heads to New Orleans. Tampa Bay will be 2.5-point favorites on the road in New Orleans. The over-under here, 44.5. Coach, obviously we're going to start with you. What are your thoughts? Saints, 2.5-point favorites 2.5-point underdogs at home with the over-under sitting at 44.5.
Home opener in the Dome. I'm definitely not afraid of being the underdog against Tampa Bay, and I know nobody else in that locker room is afraid of being the underdog, since they've been the underdog in the last couple of years to that team, and other than the playoffs, has owned them in the regular season. So the last 2 years, we're 4-0 in the regular season against them. And this is a hard number, knowing that Tampa Bay is out like some significant starters on the offensive line. And not every team could get to Brady, but one of the teams that really does get to him is New Orleans. We allowed to get to him and put that pressure on him. Hey, he is not comfortable back there, and he knows what's to be expected in the Dome against that defensive front. So he's not going in all comfy, all confident as he would against any other team. So it'll be interesting. They're also out Chris Goodwin, the wide receiver, who's a deep ball threat, normally he gives the Saints fits. Now they're going to be relying on Mike Evans. He hasn't had too good of a career against Marshawn Lattimore. He did one game last year and one game out of 8, and they really like hype it up like if it's even a competition. Under 2.5, I think the Saints they're proven to score points fast. And if they picked it up sooner in that game against Atlanta, the scoring could have been doubled very, very, very easy and very, very fast. You got a Mike Thomas that he's missed 2 years, and we all know, well, maybe not us, but you got to give these guys time and rhythm to have a feel for the game, and a time and rhythm with their quarterback, and a time and rhythm to make plays and catch up to speed with the game. So a lot of promising factors going into that fourth quarter and being able to put up points in Atlanta. So I think, 44.5, I think is a little low for both teams. I think the ability to put up points is going to be there. I definitely like the Saints minus 2.5, knowing that our kicking game is back, and Lutz isn't afraid to end games. He's shown the ability to win games with that leg. So, I mean, there's a lot of contributing factors to some of the game one disappointment. I think everybody's up for a Tampa Bay rematch, especially with against Brady, because you better bring your A game. But let's remember, the Saints were 5-2 going into last year's second game against Tampa Bay. They knocked out Jameis for the rest of the season with the torn ACL. I just hope that underlying emotional factor isn't that they don't overdo it, or Jameis doesn't overthink it or over effort it because he's thinking revenge. He doesn't need to. I think he's matured enough to know that he's got a surrounding cast that if he just does his job right and at the right speed and emotional, like emotionally just set, comfortable, that we have the ability to put up points and stop teams and stop this offense of Tampa Bay that they're hurting. And you don't know what to expect. There isn't a Gronk, there isn't a Goodwin, there isn't a solid offensive line. And you know, I think you said it last week, you know, Vegas knows better than us, especially on that Carolina Cleveland game, like one point favorite.
Yeah.
And then you're like, I see -2.5 Tampa. I was like, what else do they know that we don't know? So 2.5 I like. And I'm picking the Saints. And it's not
All right.
it might be a personal thing, but
Hey, it's like you said, 4-0 in the last 2 years in the regular season. Definitely something to keep an eye on. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Tampa Bay, the favorites as they head to New Orleans.
Yeah, this is going to be an excellent game, I think. I'll start with the over-under, and I think over 44.5 is no problem on this one. Here's why I think Tampa Bay covers the spread at -2.5. True enough, going back to 2018, the Saints have beat Tampa Bay 8 times in the regular season. The variable, and I think one reason that the odds makers might be giving Tampa Bay the nod, that was when Sean Payton held the reins. So it's almost like the new coach has to prove himself before he's going to start getting the home field advantage 3-point on the line deal. Also, Tampa Bay has won 5 straight road games. So I think those are the factors that come into play. Brady, obviously, just like I said about Alex Leatherwood, and it's a good thing we let him go. Well, Brady sure looked affected by by sitting out, 3 weeks, didn't he? I mean, he came around and he took care of business when he had to. It's going to be a fantastic game. I see a lot of points. And the other thing New Orleans has to avoid, you can't go down by 2 scores, even if it's a field goal and a touchdown. If you go down 2 scores early on in this game, it's not going to be like last week where you can catch up.
Yeah, definitely a different animal. You're going to have to be ready to roll. Obviously, with all due respect to Marcus Mariota, you got Brady coming to town, and that's going to be interesting. The 2.5 point spread is, it's tough for me to tackle because I could see it going both ways. I could see Tampa winning by a field goal, 4 points, something like that. I could see this turning into a situation where, it's a 21-20 at the end of it. Tampa gets the win. But you know what? New Orleans fought their tails off and, they won't get the cover. But I am pretty confident in the over-under. I do think we see some scoring. In this one, 2 teams that are pretty familiar with each other. I feel like Michael Thomas, it's almost like the water boy. They just get him fired up on the sideline. It's almost like these are all the things that these guys are saying about you. They're not saying that, but he has just so much just frustration built up. It's like we have to somehow channel this in a at least team positive way. So I just think that's the biggest thing right now, because as coach said, 2 years without Michael Thomas, that's a huge weapon for Jameis to have, but it is getting him back into the swing of things. We'll see how that goes. Maybe not the best team to get back into the swing of things. But I do think at the very least, it lays the groundwork down the line. Because there is going to be one more game, obviously, for these 2 teams down the road in Tampa. And if the Saints want to compete, it will be an important one. So maybe the trying to win the war, not necessarily the battle, in that situation there. But moving on to the other side of the NFC South, we have the Atlanta Falcons heading to Los Angeles. The Rams are 10.5 point favorites. And the over-under here is 45.5. Coach, we'll start with you again. The Rams, big favorites against the Falcons, a team that, I mean, they didn't win, and yeah, they went full Falcons mode, but for 3 quarters looks like a pretty good team. But what are your thoughts, Coach? Rams, huge favorites at home against the Falcons.
I think the most significant thing about last week's game between Atlanta and New Orleans is there were really no major injuries to come out of it, so advantage Atlanta. And after the Rams got just manhandled by the Bills opening up the season, like you really don't know what to expect from a guy like Matthew Stafford, losing out on a guy like, Robert Woods is no longer there, and who's the defensive end that left that's with the Bills now? Miles Garrett, Von Miller, someone that they relied on or were wanting to rely on coming back, and he's not. It's a tough game to kind of assess. And Atlanta going over to the West Coast, favor the Rams. The Rams being the Super Bowl champs, favor the Rams. Atlanta up to their old tricks, getting a lead and losing it, favor the Rams. -10.5 though. I'm gonna just leave it at that. I don't even know, because you don't know what to expect from them. You didn't really give us anything to look at that first game. And granted, it was the Bills, but granted, you are who you are too. There's a lot of things in favor of the Rams in that first game, and they just didn't come true. So I'm going to stay away from this one, and I'm going to leave it to my two colleagues, the real experts here, to give y'all a better assessment than just hearing like sounds coming out of my voice.
I'll tell you what, I guarantee you the Rams wished their game was on Amazon Prime, so not a whole lot of people saw that, because that was pretty pitiful performance last week in the opener. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Rams heavy favorites as they host the Falcons.
As I often say, do your homework. If you're Atlanta, do your homework. There was a lot of exposure on the Rams side of the ball. One of the most important is that you can get to Stafford. The other is the running game. They had 52 yards rushing. So that's a head scratcher. And if you can't have, this is not breaking news. If you don't have a strong running threat, then there's not going to be a lot of focus on it, which means you're going to get better coverage from your secondary, your linebackers, even across the middle. I think Atlanta's going to come in and play. They got their hearts broken last week. Let's face it. They came out of the gate. They were scoring all kinds of points, and then the wheels came off their wagon. I think they're going to come out just as fast, just as hard. As I said to a friend of mine, people who think Super Bowl hangover isn't a real thing, you just had to watch what the Bills did to the Rams last week. I definitely like Atlanta. Give me 1.5 point. Give me Atlanta plus 11, but I think it does go over 45.
Yeah, I agree. I think the over is the hit here, at least for me. I think the Rams kind of come out and want to maybe bully a team that they're able to bully, just to kind of quiet the haters, if you will. And Atlanta, I don't think Atlanta is going to get a chance to beat the Falcons in this one. I think they're going to probably fall behind 10-0, and they'll be constantly 10-3, 10-7, 17-14, 21-24, they're just going to constantly kind of be chasing the game, which is great for the over bettors. And I, like I said, I liked what I saw out of the offense from Atlanta. And the Rams on the defensive side of things, boy, when you get rid of a guy like Von Miller, all of a sudden now, hey, that big guy in the middle, number 99, let's throw 3 guys at him and see what else we can figure out. It makes things a little easier for the offenses in certain situations. They're definitely going to have to get some production everywhere else, and it's going to be tough. But I agree. I think Atlanta plus 10.5. Give me that all day. I think the big number like that after what I saw out of the Rams, I could be wrong, and I have no problem. If we come back next week and the Rams just put on a show, fantastic. But after what I saw last week, I'm not going to sit here and give 10.5 points. I don't care where you're playing. You're not getting 10.5 points after the performance they put on last week. And that's going to be a tough one, something to really kind of look themselves in the mirror and see how that goes. But moving on to the NFC East side of things, it'll be one of 2 Monday night games. It's an interesting one. We'll get to the other Monday night game, but there are 2 Monday night games The Eagles and Vikings will be the nightcap, if you will. Vikings head to Philadelphia. Pretty small spread here. The Eagles are 1.5 point favorites. The over under here 51.5. I'll get this one started. Obviously, last week, both of these teams offensively looked very, very good. The Vikings may have had the best overall performance, I would say. That defense looks to be back. Maybe Aaron Rodgers hasn't come down from his ayahuasca hangover or what, but they were very, very impressive against the Packers in a big game when they needed to be. The one thing with the Vikings, the Kirk Cousin led Vikings, the biggest thing that jumps out to me is inconsistency. They can go 1 week looking like title contenders to the next week wondering if they're going to finish below some other teams in that comp or in that division. I don't quite know what to expect, but I will say this: if they come out and play with what that fire that they did last week, they're gonna win this game. However, I think the Eagles at home, it's the home opener. The city of Philadelphia has a feeling about them. All you gotta do is give the city one championship, and all of a sudden, you thought we were cocky before we won a Super Bowl. Goodness gracious, now it's like you can't slow us down. We're like rabid dogs. So now when we actually have a team that can be a top 4 team in that conference, watch out. So it's going to be an interesting one. As far as I know, don't quote me on this, but I believe it's the first time the Vikings have returned to Philly since that NFC Championship game where the Eagles dominated from start to finish. The one worry I have as an Eagle fan, though, is as great as it is to have AJ Brown and Devonta Smith, it's the Justin Jefferson. I'll never forget that draft night. We were here doing it live, and I just remember before, hey, we're gonna get Justin Jefferson. All is right in the world. And I had to go on mute because Justin Jefferson was not the pick. It was Jalen Reagor, who ironically is in Minnesota as well. But at the end of the day, in terms of the 1.5 point spread, I'm going to take the home team. I'm going to take the Eagles. It's Monday night. I think the electricity will be in the air. I think this offense does enough to win the game. So give me the Eagles -1.5. I will take the over here. Obviously, I do like what I saw from the Viking defense, but once again, I'm kind of going with that electricity. I think there's going to be, a buzz in the air that's going to kind of light the offenses up. I think we're going to see a really good game. Eagles on top with the over. But let's go Raider Jim. What are your thoughts? Eagles hosting the Vikings Monday Night Football.
One of my notes, Justin Jefferson, AJ Brown for the Eagles. The top 2 receivers last week with the most yards. Jefferson had 184, Brown had 155. Plus, you still have Minnesota and Philadelphia throwing Adam Thielen and Devonta Smith at you. The Eagles' offense really executed pretty darn good. They executed well enough to go out and beat Minnesota. My concern is the play on the defensive side of the ball, specifically the tackling. The tackling was really, really lacking. And if Dalvin Cook had 90 yards last week, if he gets rolling and they can exploit any of that with the tackles or opening up holes on the line, it's going to be a different game. And that could be the difference. So for this one, I think it's actually going to be under 52. I don't know that it's really going to be the big shootout. There, I even read something earlier today saying there's a good chance this Charger Chiefs game isn't going to be the big shootout you think it is. Good, competitive, but they may not just be going back and forth scoring. So I'm going to go under 52 on this one. I am going to take Minnesota +2 on this one. And only because of the defensive performance and the concern that's in my head about that. Should be a great game though. And I also checked the weather for all the games that are playing outdoors, and nobody's got a real weather threat anywhere. So
gotcha. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I will say if the Vikings do get on top early, the Eagles aren't necessarily built to overcome big deficits. Maybe they're built better than past years, but still not built for that necessarily. Coach, what are your thoughts? Our second Monday Night Football game, pretty much the last one of the weekend, Vikings at Eagles.
So I'm glad Raider Jim brought up Cook for Minnesota, but I think the running games for both teams is really leaning toward me taking the under 51.5. You get one of these teams a lead, I think it's kind of slow down mode.
Grind.
Yeah, and what you were bringing up earlier, Mr. First, as far as Minnesota being inconsistent, those were inconsistencies with a Zimmer-led team, and maybe I'm holding Kevin O'Connell's jock after a week, but that was my only solid pick of last week anyway. But advantage Minnesota because on that defensive side, I didn't realize at the time that they had a number of Green Bay defenders on that roster, and knowing what calls were coming, and Green Bay not being able to even differentiate between play calls and whatnot. So there was an advantage Minnesota on the defensive end against an Aaron Rodgers Green Bay team. Not the case this week, but as I alluded to last week, this is a Minnesota team that has taken its lumps playing younger defenders the past 2 seasons that they expect some maturation in their third year. And I really like this Minnesota team because of that factor on the defensive end. And I really like this Minnesota team because of what Kevin O'Connell is supposed to bring to that offense versus what's been there. So I'm really in favor of Minnesota at -1.5, but I would like to stick to that under 51.5, just knowing what both teams could do with a lead, and knowing the strength of Philly's front late in games, maybe not last week, but in seasons past, and giving them a lot of credit and love, knowing what they could do in late in games with the lead. I really like that under versus the over. So yeah, I like Minnesota -1.5, and I really like the under 51.5.
Yeah, Minnesota may be that team after week 1 that was the most top to bottom impressive. And it's a perfect segue into our next game because we have 2 teams that maybe be in the top 5 for the biggest disappointments. You have Cincinnati at Dallas. Obviously, the Bengals 4 or 5 interceptions for our boy Burrow. And then on the Dallas side of things, not only do they lose the game, they lose their quarterback, Dak Prescott, 4 to 6 weeks, maybe longer, with some hand surgery, which is going to be a little interesting heading down the stretch. That injury does not magically go away. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Cincinnati on the road, they are going to be 7.5-point favorites. The over under here is only 42.
Yeah, I drop it down. I think that it's going to be a 7-point game in favor of Cincinnati. I think they'll cover by a full touchdown. I think it will go over 42. And the reason I do is I don't like when this is what comes out of my mouth, or this is what's in my mind. But, every now and then for me, it's, boy, if ever a team wanted to come out and smack somebody in the mouth for what happened the week before, this is Cincinnati. And not only that, they're going against a very weakened Dallas team because they lost Prescott. So what does Cincinnati have to do to win? Burrow has to be a little better with the ball. He has to protect it a little bit better. His offensive line has to protect him a little more. And I think that can happen. And then again, Cooper Rush, what can you say? Cooper Rush, God bless him. Get out there. In the house that Jerry built, they have not lost 2 in a row since 2010. But I think it's going to be just one-sided in this one. It's going to go over 42. I can see this being 35-14, even if the Dallas gets a last-minute gift, and so it's 35-21. For Cincinnati to win in double figures isn't going to surprise me.
Yeah, I agree. Last year, Cincinnati, they won in spite of that offensive line. They did not win because of that offensive line. I don't remember the exact number, but Burrow, I think it was over 50 sacks, the first quarterback ever to either win the conference or the division, whatever that was. This was definitely an offensive line that had a lot of issues. However, the Cowboys, once again, my goodness, they have a lot of issues. They're the only team last week to not score a touchdown. Obviously, that's a tough one. Zeke Elliott continues to show the tread on his tires. Not the dominant force he used to be. And, you know, like you said, Cooper Rush, that's going to be tough. Now, Micah Parsons, that guy, he can be a game changer. I just don't think it's enough for him. I don't expect a lot from Cincinnati this year, but I do expect this to be a game where they kind of flex their muscles and maybe, you know, show people, hey, look what we did. And there are a lot of people who just go, yeah, but it was the Cowboys, but they are still going to, I think, beat them up. I like Cincinnati here to cover pretty much any number. I think anything less than 10.5, I'd be comfortable with. I do think it'll be double digits. In terms of the over under, I just don't know how Dallas is going to score. I could go back to Burrow, maybe turning the ball over. Maybe that's how they get themselves into position and get a few touchdowns that way. But even then, 42 points, you're going to have a lot of heavy lifting out of Cincinnati, which is possible. But until I see something more from this Dallas offense, I'm going to stick with the under 42. Coach, what are your thoughts? Dallas at home against Cincinnati.
Yeah, you know, I don't feel sorry for Dallas one bit. Sorry, I just don't. I think I feel a whole lot more sorry for Joe Burrow and that offensive line that they have, but I do like Cincinnati to cover, and I just don't think either team collectively could cover that 42. Just, I mean, who is this quarterback Dallas is throwing out there is the question, and you know, if Dallas could at least show some grit and show some fight, they're going to get to Burrow at least, but I think that keeps the score as is, and I could see Cincinnati winning handedly, and their defense is no slouch either, and if Dallas doesn't have anything as far as knowing how to utilize their weapons, it's going to be a long day. So yeah, I think Cincinnati by double digits is a good call.
Yeah, I will say 20 years ago today was or not today, at some point this week, I don't know if it was Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, was the 20-year anniversary of a no-name quarterback replacing a injured Drew Bledsoe. So, you know, I'm sure
Wrong
that's just a
system,
coincidence.
wrong coach.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Everything. Yeah. Mike McCarthy was involved in this situation. End of correlation.
Yeah.
Moving on to speaking of the New England Patriots, you have the Patriots heading to Pittsburgh. Patriots are 2-point favorites against the Steelers, who got a bit of a stolen victory against the Bengals, last week. The over-under here is the lowest we'll talk about. The over-under is 40. I'll start this one off. Pittsburgh was kind of, you know, the old Dennis Green. They are who we thought they were. It's not going to be pretty on offense. They'll do enough. And defensively, they're going to have a presence. However, that presence with TJ Watt, my goodness, that's a tough one. 4 to 6 weeks at best. And there are a lot of people leaning on the other side of this season. And that would be really tough. I don't know how Pittsburgh makes the playoffs without Watt. But going forward, looking at this game this week, these are two offenses that I think are highly overrated. I don't think either coach is really inclined to really open up the playbook right now. I think it's going to be a very cagey affair. 20-17 is probably the cap here in this one. So I do like the under here. In terms of New England is 2-point favorites. Oh, goodness gracious. I don't know. I'll be honest. This is one, flip a coin. If you're so inclined, I'll take Pittsburgh just because they're going to be at home. I think the crowd's going to feel that ability. Hey, we win here today. We're 2-0. And if you think Eagle fans are annoying when they get a little bit of success, you've never met a Steeler fan. But in that situation, I'm just going to lean Pittsburgh's way, just because I do think there are not too many times that Bill Belichick's going to go into a game and he will be somewhat close in terms of the opposing coach. Mike Tomlin might not be somebody that people, will go and fight for and advocate for, but he is a hell of a football coach. He's right there with Bill Belichick in terms of, I think, experience in that tier. But give me Pittsburgh, not confidently, but I do like the under. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? New England heading to Pittsburgh as 2-point favorites?
Yeah, I think reality has to be setting in the New England locker room, in the coach's room, in the fan base, for them to move the ball or not move the ball the way they did not last week, to only get 7 points on the opener was a bit surprising to me. I thought they could do better than that. I didn't have them winning the game, but I thought they would do better than 7 points. Pittsburgh, on the other hand, heck, they weren't supposed to come out and do what they did last week. They got to Burrow 7 times. And I understand, TJ Watt's out, but
it wasn't just him. Yeah.
Watch what happens on Sunday. I think they're going to bring it. They're going to bring it hard. Minka Fitzpatrick is going to have a good game. He's going to be dialed in. He's going to have crosshairs on the quarterback, Mac Jones. And I just see this Pittsburgh's game all the way. And I see it under, though. I don't think it's going to be a score fest. Fascinating fact. First game since '98 where there hasn't been either both Big Ben and Brady or Big Ben on the field when these two teams meet. That's going back. And also Pittsburgh is 6-1 in their last 7 home games. So also something to consider.
There we go. Raider Jim bringing the facts as always. Coach, what are your thoughts? Steelers home underdogs against the Patriots.
Before I can't even say they took the pedal off the gas last week, but before they allowed Cincinnati to get back in that second half, I was like, this is everything that I said. This is the Trubisky era, taking out Cincinnati. And then I look at this spread and I'm like, wow, New England's favored -2. And I'm like, did I not see? But apparently, they're getting graded and judged on that second half and letting Cincinnati back in. But I don't think New England's that explosive on the offensive end to be given that kind of respect. I think this is a low scoring game. I think this is probably a bigger game for Najee Harris than any other skill player
Absolutely.
on the field. And Tomlin's of that mold of that era, that era that him and Belichick share, not nowadays. Run it down and hold the lead and give it to the back and let him dictate time and dictate possession and field positioning. And it's going to be a drag it out, slow, old school type game where not a lot of offense is going to be scored and defenses and games are going to be won in the trenches, opening up holes and clock management and whatnot. So big game for the running game, I think, for Najee Harris. And I think I said it there last week. They're not going to rely on Mitchell Trubisky to make big plays down the field and bring them back, but they're expecting him to make the right plays and protect the ball. And in this situation, that's the game plan.
Yeah. It's going to be a tough one. It's certainly, Coach, you brought it up, or no, I'm sorry, it might have been Raider Jim who brought up the Big Ben, Tom Brady. Definitely new look, not the normal kind of beasts of the AFC like we're used to seeing these two teams. Probably be lucky if we see one of these teams in the playoffs, but probably.
Yeah, now this has kind of turned into George Foreman and Larry Holmes.
Yes. It's kind of that, like, wow, you guys are still here situation. But it's going to be interesting. Obviously, I do think the line really shows at least in the odds makers' eyes, the importance of a TJ Watt to that Steeler team. Be interesting to see what that line was if he was fully healthy. But Moving on to a AFC or an NFC West matchup. Speaking of kind of the good old days, we don't see the Legion of Boom versus the Colin Kaepernick and the Harbaugh anymore, but it is the Seattle Seahawks heading to San Francisco. The Niners are 9-point favorites. The over-under here, 41.5. Seattle is the team that's 1-0 here. San Francisco, a little bit of a shock, took the L in Chicago. Ray or Jim, let's get started with you. Bears and Seahawks and Niners going back in time.
We're at Seattle, right? Seattle, San Francisco.
Seattle, sorry.
Now I don't know if it's just me, but are you guys surprised at all of these 9-point, 9.5 point, 10.5 point, 11 point, all of these large spreads? And again, as we say, one of us usually says it during the podcast. What do they know that we don't? Because I watched what Seattle did against Denver, and I thought it was very respectable. You get Geno Smith, man, if he can get going, he's got wheels, he can move around. So he's going to have, Bosa might have to chase him from behind as opposed to just get to him. The only thing is they are playing with two, if I'm not mistaken, two rookie tackles. And that, that might be a bit of a difference maker. We'll wait and see. But I think Seattle to cover the 9, I don't see that being a problem. I also don't see it being, I also think over 41 for sure in this one. But San Francisco, Deebo Samuel's going to do his thing. What can you say? And so if at best they are going to have a real track meet back and forth, we'll see what happens on the defensive side of the ball for Seattle. I think they are going to play a very competitive game. The other thing is, just like we spoke earlier, Tampa Bay and the Saints. Doesn't matter who's where and who's what. The Saints have Tampa Bay's number. The last 8 regular season games. Well, guess what? In the last 10 games, the record between these two teams is Seattle has 8 wins, San Francisco has 2. So, and they got the same guy at the helm coaching them, so he knows how to beat these guys.
Yeah, this is an interesting one for a lot of reasons. Obviously, I'll blame the weather. I don't want to fully judge Trey Lance on a monsoon game. However, it's that word again, inconsistency. There were plays that you went, wow. And there were other plays where you went, ooh, wow. And my biggest thing is for the Niners and Kyle Shanahan, the players in that locker room, they don't care who gets paid what. They don't care who was drafted where. They don't care what makes sense for this team in the future. If in their mind that Jimmy Garoppolo gives them a better chance of winning and they don't go to Jimmy Garoppolo,
right,
that becomes a problem. That's how locker rooms are lost. Now, I'm not going to sit here and argue that Trey Lance is the future and Jimmy G isn't. Once again, those players don't care about the future because everyone's essentially on a 1-year contract. Let's be honest. You could be cut really 1 week if we're being honest with each other. So they want to have the best chance to win right now. It's going to be interesting to see going forward if San Francisco does admit, and once again, I'm not sitting here saying that Trey Lance isn't the answer, but I'll say this right now. If you put a gun to my head, Jimmy Garoppolo gives the Niners the best chance to win. It might not be a very good chance, but it gives them the best chance to win going forward. That'll be something to go on this week, though. I do think Trey Lance is enough. It's the home opener. I think there's enough kind of built up frustration from last week that gets the job done at the end of the day. So give me the 9 points. I'd love for it to be lower, but I wasn't terribly impressed with Seattle. I think that was their Super Bowl, beat Russell Wilson, and now everything else is gravy essentially. But it's going to be tough going forward for these two teams. I think both of them, but give me San Francisco in terms of the over under 41.5. I'll take the over here. I do think we do see enough scoring, even if it comes in garbage time late. I do think we see enough scoring to get us over that. What I think is a small number, assuming weather isn't an issue, because I do think that kind of slowed the Niners offense down. Even if it wasn't through the air, but definitely Deebo Samuel side of things. Coach,
Now, is Kittle still out?
He's going to be back this week.
yeah,
He is going to be back.
Last
Okay.
week was the only week they canceled him out and
Got it.
expect him to play week 2 is what I remember.
gotcha. Yeah. Coach, what are your thoughts? Big spread for the home team Niners.
I don't necessarily like the spread for the Niners, but I do like the game for them. 41.5, I think, is doable for them to go over. Again, you don't expect those kind of games from Geno Smith week to week. 8-year veteran, in and out of starting roles, backup roles, whatnot. And you touched on the emotional aspect of last week's game for Seattle versus Russell Wilson in Denver. So that plays a whole lot into it. We all know that 12th man plays a significant factor in that team's performance. But being in San Francisco, they don't have that. And you're right. I think Garoppolo gives this team the best opportunity to win, even though I think San Francisco could win here. Garoppolo also gives this team the best chance to cover spreads like this. Now, this is I expect the spread to change by game day. And if it's a double-digit spread, then I'm going to pick Seattle. But right now, I just picked Seattle to cover the -9, but San Francisco to win. So Trey Lance is an unproven commodity. And until he shows the ability to lead that offense, cool, calm, and collective with the ability to put up points, then that spread is extremely large for a kid to have on his shoulders.
Agreed. Especially once again, I know the weather was not pleasant, but it certainly didn't show a whole lot that you could look at and go, yep, there's the 9 points right there. Speaking of another rather large spread, however, this one I think makes the most sense out of all of the quote unquote, the big bad bullies. The Buffalo Bills will host the Tennessee Titans. Buffalo 10-point favorites. 48.5 is the over under. Raider Jim will let you get us started here. Tennessee heads to Buffalo after Buffalo opening night really showed a really good performance.
Yeah, on the Tennessee side of the ball, Tannehill and Henry didn't look like the offensive juggernaut that they have in the past. And I don't know if the situation where, because he's so big, because he's so ripped, and because he gets the ball, when he gets the ball and touches it, Henry is 110 miles an hour from the time he touches it until he hits a wall or until he's brought down by a group of people. Is it starting to take a toll? Has it already taken a toll? The 18 yards is the longest run he had last week. And I think because of that, the way that the offense played for Tennessee, what we saw Buffalo do against the defending world champions, let me tell you, this is the one spread that I will take 10. I think Buffalo covers by 2 scores easily. 48.5. The only concern with me is you wonder if Tennessee is going to be able to score. It might end up being, 35 to 10, which I guess, and that's not going to cover it. Even if it was 38 to 10, that's 48.5 is the spread right now, or the over under. So I'm going to take Buffalo -10. I'm going to drop it down to 48 because I think they will, Tennessee, give them a touchdown in each half, and then Buffalo puts up 35 points. Another one of these little fascinating trivia things I saw. It's like the Bills are 20-1 in games where Allen throws a pass and runs for a touchdown. That's amazing. That's an amazing stat.
And I think that only one is against my Saints.
Could be. Yes,
probably.
I'm just kidding.
Just getting ready to fact check him over here.
Yeah, I loved your facts. I just wanted to get in on that.
I will say this, and no one will ever be able to tell me otherwise. Not a single human being was on the Josh Allen train before Coach Lupian. I will say that right now. So because of that, we'll go to you, Coach. What are your thoughts? Buffalo, big, heavy favorites at home against the Tennessee Titans.
I don't know if it's so much I need to hype up Josh Allen and the Bills, because their abilities and their performance kind of spoke for itself against the defending World Series or Super Bowl champion. Sorry, wrong sport. But it might be the inability of a guy like Tannehill to handle the pressure that the Bills are going to be bringing with that front. We saw what Von Miller did to his former team, and they're expecting that same kind of performance week in, week out. And Tennessee's no different. So is Tannehill going to be able to handle that pressure, play in, play out? And like Raider Jim alluded to, is Henry feeling the effects of all those, not just alone hits, but he's led the league in carries year after year after year, whether he's gone unscathed and untouched or he's taking on multiple tacklers. It adds up on the legs. And you brought up one name early in this podcast, and that was Sean Alexander. Sean Alexander had a run for multiple years that Henry has had more recently in these years. And in that 1 year, I take him in the first round of my fantasy draft. He hasn't, that was it. Father Time finally caught up to him. I'm not saying Father Time has caught up to Henry in this case, but I think we could all see he's not getting every carry, every down last game, or even at the second half of last season. They have a skill back, and they like to share the handoffs or the carries between two guys, and he's taking less hits, and he's less rhythmic, and they gave up their number one wide receiver to you guys. So what's to offer on the offensive end? I do. Raider Jim convinced me -10 is a lovely spread, and for 8.5 might be just too much for Tennessee to maintain and uphold against Buffalo, unless it's a 49-0 romp.
Yeah,
The only time I'm taking the over, but I don't think respectfully for Mike Vrabel team and that Tennessee team would give up. So
yeah, Tennessee, not a good look last week, obviously losing to the Giants. A game, now I'll give credit to the Giants. It looked bad. And I'll tell you this right now, Brian Dable, I don't want to say agree with it or anything like, I just didn't think it was a great decision. He kind of aired out Daniel Jones on the sideline at one point. First game, rookie head coach. I know Daniel Jones isn't, destined for Canton by any stretch, but he is a veteran and he's been there longer than Brian Dable. And to their credit, they stood up and they went out and they won the game from there on out. So credit them. But for Tennessee, a lot of questions because Daniel Jones able to kind of go out and put up 21 points. Well, Daniel Jones is like the first evolution, and Josh Allen is like the ultimate evolution. He's the guy.
He's the guy Daniel Jones wants to be.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's the guy. I mean, Daniel Jones is a very poor man's Josh Allen. Let's be honest. He can run and throw, just do things pretty average both ways. Josh Allen above average, if not elite, in both of those categories. The 20-1 record when Josh Allen throws and rushes for a touchdown, I feel like lately that's kind of what you need to expect out of him. He's going to get it both ways. I think 10 points here is as easy of the 10-point cover as you can see right now after what I saw out of Tennessee last week. However, I do think Mike Vrabel, he's not going to let his team be embarrassed 2 weeks in a row. At the same point, does the talent gap maybe make that too difficult to avoid? I say yes, unfortunately, especially in Buffalo. 48.5, I agree with y'all. I like the under here. Unless I can see more out of Tennessee, we'll hold that down. And I think it's going to be a very, very tough game for Tennessee. I don't think they get enough points scored to get us over the get us to the over, I should say. So final game we'll be talking about this podcast. We have two teams that had very surprising week ones for very different reasons. You had the Chicago Bears heading to Green Bay. The Packers 9.5-point favorites, 42.5 is the over under. I'll get this one started. 9.5 points for a Green Bay team that was out received by the player they sent away in the offseason. Aaron Rodgers was rolling his eyes. He was throwing his hands up in disgust. The young, talented wide receivers have not shown up just yet for Green Bay. And once again, Aaron Rodgers is not someone that's going to keep his body language under control. You can see the frustration. I know this game is in Lambeau. Aaron Rodgers has the Bears number, but I'll tell you what, most of the times Aaron Rodgers has the Bears number, the Bears are covering the spread. I like the Bears to cover the spread here as well. I liked what I saw out of Justin Fields. I made excuses for the weather for Trey Lance. Well, Justin Fields wasn't asked to do a whole lot, but when he was asked, he delivered. So we'll see how that goes. I wasn't terribly impressed with Green Bay's defense. Going forward, I think it's going to be a tough one. Chicago always plays the Packers tough. Give me the Bears plus 9.5. In terms of the over-under, 42.5. I will take the over here. Aaron Rodgers will be able to do this as well. So, Coach, we'll get one pick in from you real quick before you head out. You got the Packers 9.5-point favorites at the Bears. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I just, it's hard for me to gauge this game because neither team gave me much to grade them on after week one. I could see Green Bay easily taking the 9.5 at home just because it's at home and it's a young quarterback on the other end for Chicago. So 42.5 on the over under. I think both teams are unproven commodities. Neither of them, and this could be just me early in the season grading them on what was happening last week. 42.5 is just not efficient, or neither team's efficient enough to get that over. And until those guys, those weapons around Aaron Rodgers really prove their mustard, 9.5 is a large number, and a large number like that in conference play is hard for me to accept. So get it together, Chicago, and make me a winner.
There you go. Thank you so much, Coach. I know you got to head out, but as always, we appreciate
Coach,
your
good
time.
seeing you.
Well, yes, it was.
We'll catch up. You guys have a good evening.
Thank you.
You do the same. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Final game, we're talking about Chicago heading to Lambeau. Big underdogs. The over-under sits at 42.5.
In the Olympics where you have throughout the high score, throughout the low score, and that's your real score. So with this Chicago 49er game, I mean, given the circumstances, wow. And try to explain to somebody who you're watching the game and they go, wait a minute, they can't play. And I explained the science of a baseball and hitting a baseball and banging the race. Why are these guys allowed to continue to be out there like when it's that bad? They can walk.
Yeah.
They can just grab the ball, they can hold on to it, and they can run, and they can block and push each other. But that said, Chicago got the victory. Justin Fields had a great game. I think he'll have an okay game this week. I think Chicago plus 10 is doable. So I would take another half point, go Chicago plus 10. Now, I'm the guy that walks around saying, do your homework and do your studies and know what you're looking at. I didn't do my homework on the game last week. What I didn't realize is I knew Devontae Adams, of course, was not going to be a target. I didn't realize Alan Lazard was not going to be a target. I didn't realize the two starting offensive tackles weren't playing last week. Those three guys are supposed to be back this week, which is good. However, John Runyon, the guard, is going through concussion protocol. And if they do that, as I was reading, if the Bears can get up the middle and get to Rodgers, he's not Mr. Mobility, but he can dump it fast. But if they can put pressure on him, it's going to be an interesting game. 42.5 on the over-under. I don't see it doing that. I see 24-10, 24-17. I see it 41 points, something like that.
Yeah, I think that's a good call there. It's going to be an interesting one. Obviously, the Packers need to get things back under control, and the Bears want to continue on, but it's going to be a big ask, especially in Lambeau. Final thoughts, Raider Jim, as we close in on week 2.
Well, let's just hope that week 1 was a fluke all the way around, with terrible elements over on the Bears and 49ers side, and poor Dak Prescott and TJ Watt, all these injuries that occurred. Let's hope it starts to come back down to earth, and we're going to be able to get real reads on people, and that when we convene again next week, we're not going to see this rash of double score spreads or double digit spreads, because that just boggles my mind.
Yeah. And not only that, you have 2 teams. I mean, that it's kind of like the opposite, right? A layman would look and go, well, wait, the Bears looked good last week and the Packers looked terrible. Why is it 9.5 for the for the Packers? And you kind of have to dive in. Well, it is Aaron Rodgers, it is Lambeau, things like that. Sometimes you try and explain things too much, and you explain yourself out of a win, or you explain yourself out of kind of logic. So that is something, as I've always said, weeks 1 through 3 and 17, now 18, those weeks are so difficult to predict. You just don't know everyone's mindset. You don't know how everyone's going to fit in. And I think, this week it's going to be a lot of fun to kind of see a little bit as we get closer towards figuring out who these teams are. But we're still, I think, a pretty few weeks away from really getting a read on the league, but really excited to do it with, of course, Raider Jim and Coach, as always, here on the First Off the Bench Podcast Network. So with that, thank you all so much for listening to this edition of the Week 2 NFL Weekly, presented by the First Off the Bench Podcast Network. Everyone comes off the bench, but we are first. It is time for you all to go wash your hands and stop hating everybody. We'll talk to you all very soon. Take care and have a good weekend.
Peace out.